Charter Trustees, officers, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Worshipful Mayor of Bournemouth.
Rest of the barrack from the side. Right. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bournemouth Trustees meeting. I'd like to welcome the Charter Trustees to this meeting with the Bournemouth Charter Trustees, funnily enough, and to the press and members of the public, which there are none. Please note this meeting is to be recorded for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to assure that the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone follow these ground rules for speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand in the normal manner. Where there appears to be a consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there is any dissension. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a show of hands. Before we start the business on the agenda, as you know, the Charter Trustees is a non-political body with the primary objective to maintain and promote the historic and ceremonial traditions of Bournemouth. And I am certainly keen that we work together to maintain this objective. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies? Richard, or is it yourself? Is it? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Apologies have been received from Councillor Bull, Councillor Dove, Councillor Dunlop, Councillor Mike Green, Councillor Nicola Green, Councillor Iyengar, Councillor Phillips, and Councillor Rocker. And Councillor Northover, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Can I ask the Honorary Clerk, can you report on any declarations of interest received?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None have been received to date.
Therefore, can I also move on to item 3, which is a confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting and any matters arising. Does anybody have any matters arising from the last meeting? I can assume that we can accept them as okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 4, the Mayor Charters, or my report. Are you all sitting comfortably? I tell you what, it's really interesting being the mayor. You'd be surprised if you ever get the opportunity to do it. And there are several mayors in the audience. It's one of the most interesting things you'll ever do in your life. It really is. It's fascinating how people respect and are happy to see the mayor visit their establishment. But before I go on to that, can I just do one thing? As you know, since our last meeting, we've lost the Majesty of the Queen. And what a night that was for myself and the Mayoress. We were on our way to a function, and we received a phone call, we heard on the radio that, as we probably all did, that the music was interrupted and she'd passed away. And then literally 5 minutes later, I received a phone call from the Echo. And I was driving. And how do you respond on such a sudden, difficult piece of news while you're driving your car to try and respond to that loss? And then 5 minutes later, after that, another phone call to say that the function we were going to was being cancelled. So, back home. It was a difficult evening, I must say. Can I also say and mention that we have lost, and some of you may not know her, but we have lost an outstanding councillor who didn't stand at the last election, a councillor, and is the mum of Councillor Mark Anderson. Sue was a councillor for a number of years, and I knew her very well. She was a lovely lady, very kind, very caring, and an outstanding councillor. And she unfortunately passed away a few weeks ago, and she had a funeral on Friday, which I was unable to attend because I was in Norway. And I'm really sad that I couldn't attend her funeral. She was an outstanding councillor, as I say, and a really nice person. And she and I will surely miss her, and I know obviously Mark will as well. Can I therefore ask, and if you will oblige me, could we have a minute's silence for Sue, please, if you would like to stand? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Can I just now give trustees a brief outline of some of the stuff I have done recently. Some of the stuff is more interesting than others, and that's not a criticism of any function I've gone to. But one of the most interesting ones I went to, I meant to say at the last meeting, was I went to one of my first functions. Can anybody in the room play chess? Have you ever been to a blind chess meeting? Oh yeah, 2 ex-mayors, yeah. I got this invite through from Hazel saying, Councillor Lawton, would you like to attend the British Blind Chess Association at the Marsham Court? So she's having a laugh, isn't she? You know, blind chess. How do you play chess if you're blind? So we went along. It was a Sunday evening, and there was about 20 to 30 people in the room of various degrees of sight. Some completely blind, or some partially blind, and they come from all over the country. I thought, how on earth do you play chess? So I asked the organizer. He said, well, it's simple, really. You have a chessboard with a black and white squares on it, sorry, but the black square is slightly raised, so if you run your hand along it, the black square is slightly raised. Well, how do you tell the difference between a white pawn and a black pawn? The black pawn has a slightly sharp edge on the top of it, or a piece, so they can feel if it's slightly sharp, that's the black. And they move in the same way when you ever play chess, you know, bishop to king 4 or whatever. They speak to each other and then move it, and they have a clock at the side, so the games can last anything up to 4 hours. And they don't write it down, but they record it, so it's recorded as well. And that's how they play. And it's quite amazing, actually amazing to watch them playing. It's quite awe-inspiring, it really is, it's quite moving. And as I say, people have come from all over the country. There was a young lady, well, she was young to me, she must have been about 35, 40. And she'd come all the way on the train, on her own, travelled down by train from London to Bournemouth to find the Marsham Court. And you think, that's quite, fantastic. But anyway, it's one of the most really interesting things you've seen. We recently went to the Black History Month at the Hilton Hotel, or a celebration of the Black History. And that was interesting as well, listen to speakers there, and you appreciate and understand the difficulties that black people have in society. That was interesting. We went to if anybody knows Hainsbury Head, where there's the old Coast Guard lookout tower, HMS Coast Guard, which has been closed for a number of years, but myself and Councillor Coop managed to get it reopened. and it's now manned by volunteers who have some quite serious equipment there, and they look out for people in distress, either on the beach or at sea. And it's really interesting, and they work quite closely and hand in hand with Her Majesty's Coast Guard. So it's quite a significant development in that area. We also went, along with the Mayor of Poole, to the Samaritans annual branch meeting at the RNLI in Poole. Excuse me. And that was, again, an interesting evening. They had a couple of, well, there was one man who was an ex-prisoner and was quite open about, he didn't say what his crime was, but he was quite open about that he was an ex-convict and how the Samaritans have helped him to rehabilitate and now he's rebuilding his life. His marriage broke down and for whatever crime he'd committed, etc. But now, because of the Samaritans, he's rebuilding his life and has now become an extremely useful and welcome member of society. So it's nice to be able to see people who can rebuild and have received help. We also went to I went to the Prama Life Memory Lane group, which is based at the Salvation Army place in Boscombe, and where they help people who have various degrees of dementia. And that's quite moving, again, to see people, some reasonably young, but some quite elderly. And it's amazing, I don't know about yourselves, but some people, you find people with dementia, they can't remember what they did in the morning or yesterday, but they can remember what they did 60 years ago. It's amazing, really amazing. And then finally, one of the highlights is myself and the chairman, we opened the Bournemouth Air Festival. And because I'd written to the Queen and asked for her permission if we could call it the Platinum Jubilee Bournemouth Air Festival, she kindly, or one of her secretaries kindly wrote back to me and gave us that permission, which was nice. And the Air Festival was a great success, I believe. I don't know the numbers and the financial benefits to the town, but that was really nice. So that was basically a quick synopsis of, I've done loads of other stuff, but I didn't want to bore you with all the details, but that's a quick synopsis of some of the things which I've done as mayor. And as I said earlier on, it's been really interesting to see what's going on. Now, one other thing I'd like to mention while I'm here on the Mayor's report is that I've been trying to revive as you probably may or may not be aware, we are twinned with a town in Israel called Netanya, which is on the northwest coast of Netanya. And I've been there. It's very similar to Bournemouth. It has cliffs, beach, and so on. It's a holiday resort in Netanya. And we're quite friendly with the mayor there. And I'm going to ask Councillor Fowler in a minute to give some details, but we're trying to organise a trip if people are interested to visit Netanya in March of next year. And I'm also trying to revive our links with Lucerne in Switzerland. That may take a little bit more time, but I'm hoping that we can organise a visit if people are willing to come along. To do an official visit as a mayor, you get to see and get to do things which you wouldn't normally do. Like, for example, in Israel, we've been to the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament. We've met Israeli prime ministers. We've been to the Israeli ambassador's residence, met the British ambassador's residence, and met the British ambassador. And that's fascinating stuff. And you get to see things which you wouldn't normally see as a tourist. So consider it. It's a worthwhile trip, and although Israel is a difficult country and ignoring the politics, every time I've been there, I've always felt safe and not under any threat whatsoever. But I'll ask Councillor Fowler if she can quickly give us a resume of where she is with it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I wasn't prepared to say anything tonight, so this is unprepared. It's just to say that the Mayor of Netanya was very keen and has sent an invitation to either sent or is sending an invitation to the Mayor of Bournemouth for us to come and visit the city. We're not sure exactly of the date. It's a question of when our Mayor is able to come, when we're going to miss a council meeting. We don't want to miss any important scrutiny meetings. But a number of people in this room have been with us, and it's a really interesting week. We stay in a modest hotel, and we all pay for ourselves. This is not paid for by the city, but it's a great opportunity. Mr. Mayor has told us some of the things we do, things like the British ambassador, and I'm looking around the room. Certainly when we were just Bournemouth, a number of people came. Then lockdown happened. We were hoping to go we were certainly hoping to go during David Kelsey's mayoralty, but COVID came and we couldn't do any of those things. And so there also, I spoke today to the lady who organises it from the other end, and they're also suffering the way we are. They've got very few staff. It used to have a big department, a tourism department, and they're down now to 3, one of whom seems to be permanently ill. So it'll be fairly low-key, and we keep the cost down as much as we can, but we do take the opportunity. First of all, we have a day in Netanya when they show us all their social services, adult problems. They've got a huge IT sector which they've built up from absolutely nothing. It will be interesting for us to find out how did they do that. They take an enormous number of immigrants and rehouse them and look after them. Is something that we seem to struggle with. They seem to manage it, people from all over the world and from all different circumstances, from fairly comfortable and certainly cultured Russians down to Ethiopians who literally come out of the desert. So it's an interesting trip, and we take the opportunity to visit Jerusalem, and we take the opportunity to go to see the Galilee, and to go to Nazareth and all the places that you've heard of. So we hope it's going to go ahead. It'll be mid-March. We don't want to stray into election territory. I'm possibly looking at the week commencing the 14th of March. The weather will be fair. It won't be boiling hot. It'll be pleasant. And we'll keep you posted. As soon as I've got some details and some dates which suit us both, we'll be letting you know. And I hope that we'll have a nice group to go. We can go with partners and other bits, whatever you've got, or anyone you'd like to bring along with you, that's absolutely fine. It is fun, and it's a lovely way. Sometimes it's 5 weeks, 5 days, and sometimes it's a week. It depends on costs, flights, all those sort of things. But I think everybody who's been before, and there's a few nods around the room, have enjoyed it immensely, and it's absolutely cross-party. There's no question of party politics on this one. Whoever wants to go is more than welcome, and we're delighted to go with them. So keep you posted.
Thank you, Anne. I shall tell my wife she's a bit from now on, but I don't think I'll be very welcome if I went. Okay, thank you, Anne. We'll take now item 5 on the agenda, the report of a civic working group which we've set up, and I'll ask David Kelsey to report on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll remember that at the last meeting we decided as a group that we would set up a working group to go through a few of the issues that have been going backwards and forwards and been put on the back burner, and the things that really, after 3 years, needed to be sorted out with regards to the mayoralty, etc. We had a meeting. There were a group of us, sort of quite a diverse group. Some of us had totally different opinions of things to others. But we did come to some forms of consensus along the way. We had much debate over it, a lot of toing and froing. And you'll see by the report that there are some recommendations that have been made, and they are recommendations that we will need to vote on tonight. So I'll quickly run through what those items were, and then we'll take the whole lot at the end as we would normally, and we'll take any questions that are needed as well. The first item was the hanging of portraits in the parlour. Now, as you know, the whole function of the Charter Trustees is to uphold the traditions of the mayoralty. Now, all the pictures that are in there are there for a specific reason, be they the very first mayors of the town or mayors that have done major things within the town and the borough. And we were asked about having new portraits put up in there. And there was a lot of debate about it. There is one up on the wall of Derek, and there was another one that was due to go up as well. But it was decided amongst the working groups that we shouldn't disrupt the pattern of pictures that were in the parlour, and we should stick to the parlour being an historical place for historical reasons. But what we did decide was that any new portraits of mayors would be displayed in the mayoress's parlour. And we thought that that was a good compromise for everybody, so they can still have them. We also have the gallery of very old mayors in the hallway, and there was talk of removing them, but we felt that that was very much a part of Bournemouth's history, and that they should stay there, and we should use up the limited space that we have on those, and maybe take some of the very old ones down to allow for newer mayors to have their pictures put up in that gallery there, so we can all see them. It took a long time for us to decide this, but we came to the conclusion that keeping the parlour as it is now is how it should be, and the newer pictures for because we are now Charter Trustees as opposed to then the parlour was Bournemouth Mayors, and I think we need to keep the two different. We need to keep them separate. So having the Charter Trustees pictures up in the Mayoress's parlour we thought was a good compromise for that. So I'll take each item as we go because it saves just doing a whole bundle. Is there any questions on that particular item? Derek.
I'm the problem child.
We know.
Because, well, at my age, I suppose I am young enough to do it. It's just that if my portrait is in the parlour at the present time, whilst I was still Bournemouth Council's mayor, so for you to the wording I like at the moment, no additional portraits in the mayor's parlour, according to Bournemouth history and tradition. So what you're saying is, I've got to come out. So your last mayor of Bournemouth, it's just taken out. I can't agree with that. If I warranted to get up there in the first place, because I was the last mayor, it just happened to fall in my lap at the time. I don't really think that I should be removed because somebody else circulated another portrait, because at the same time, as I'm mayor of Bournemouth, I'm also the first chartered mayor. So, and there's talk in this thing about two portraits. There isn't two, there's only one. And the one is, you know, me to continue as mayor and me to be the chartered mayor for 3 months, right? And I think that is totally wrong. I don't know if you put it take the portrait down, where you're going to put it. I could suggest 1 or 2 places, but right. But I don't think it's right if somebody's just fell into the job and ended up with the opportunity of being the last mayor of Bournemouth. I didn't plan it 10 years ago or anything like that. It just happened to fall in on that. So I think that's totally unfair on me, because the second portrait you're talking about has never been accepted, because it can't be accepted because you can't have 2 trustee mayors for the first year. I've got both jobs.
I think, Derek, if I can cut across you, if we were to go down that lines of the fact that you were the last mayor, we would then be looking back at when it was Bournemouth Borough Council, before that, when the town has evolved over the years, and we've never replaced a picture with the last mayor of that era. The mayors that are up in the chamber at the parlour at the moment are there for historical reasons. Your portrait was going to be placed into the mayoress's parlour and placed in that room. It wasn't being thrown in the bin. That was never any intention. It was to go into the mayoress's parlour, and that's where Charter Trustees portraits will go from the future. There was no question of you being chucked in the bin. It was going to be placed in the mayoress's parlour, and the older members, like the original, your Hankinsons, your Bessie Bicknells and the such like, were the ones that were going to remain in the parlour. Okay? Okay. Any other questions? George?
Forgotten how that works. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I think Derek raises a very good point as regards to my mind of the circular nature, of the historical nature, that I think the last mayor of Bournemouth, the Bournemouth Borough Council, should be marked in such a way as historical. And as you said yourself, the mayor's parlour is to be kept for history. And I think Derek, in his role as the last mayor of Bournemouth Borough Council, raises a very good point. And moving forward, I would not necessarily, because I understand that the working group has done their work and we've had the debate around it, and I don't know the ins and outs. But can I just ask the question, is the last mayor of Bournemouth Borough Council currently, the portrait, currently in the chamber, the mayor's parlour at the moment?
Yeah.
Well, I suggest that I won't be able to support the recommendation that it's removed, because to my mind, particularly going all the way back to, Russell Coates, etc., is that Bournemouth is a very historical town, and Derek is a part of that history now as the last Bournemouth mayor. So I wouldn't be able to support removing the last mayor of Bournemouth from the mayor's parlour. I just don't see the sense of that. I think he's a part of history himself, and I think he should be afforded that right.
Thanks, George. Mr. Mayor.
You raise a reasonable point, George, but the committee felt that this was the best option. Secondly, when we became a unitary, the mayor of the day we became a unitary, their portrait was not put in the chamber, in the mayor's parlour. So it's a similar situation where you have that. I understand Derek's feelings. I can understand that entirely. But I think the last mayor portrait that went up there, correct me if I'm wrong, is obviously the female mayor, our first female mayor.
Betty Bicknell.
Betty Bicknell, which is in 1960, is it? 61? So it's a long time ago. And if we're not careful, we're going to set a precedent here. So we need to draw a line somewhere. We're not asking for Derek's portrait to be thrown in the bin. We're asking that all of it be put in the mayoress's parlour, which is a perfectly acceptable room. I'd be happy for my portrait if it was, or picture to be in there when that room is finished, when the refurbishment of the town hall is finished, and the people who are using it, the civic people, registrars who are using it at the present time, move out and back to their own area of the civic centre.
Yeah, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the working group for a very difficult task to do. Obviously, everybody's got their own opinions on this, but I think the reasons that you've set out have been quite clear. It's never a particularly easy job, but also we have to remember that since BCP Council came into being, that is not technically our parlour anymore. That is the parlour that is allocated for use by BCP, so that is another dynamic that I think we have to consider. I'm personally happy to support the recommendation as put in the paper. I think it strikes a right balance of recognising the historical value and the reasons behind those portraits that are already in the parlour, but not opening a can of worms for the future. However, I think one of the things that is important is that we have to recognise the real historical value of the mayoralty and how we can ensure going forward that that's not eroded. So whilst I appreciate putting the new mayors into the mayoress's parlour is a short-term solution, I just wonder whether we might want to look at other solutions as well. I certainly know when I look for things now, when I'm interested in things, I go onto the internet, I go onto the web, and I think in the future, in 100 or 200 years' time, I'm sure there might be some people that would be interested in what the current mayors were up to at that time, and they probably won't be able to pop into a building if the building is even here. However, hopefully the web still will exist. So I wonder, maybe for the working group, or maybe as a new piece of work to look at in the future, whether to explore whether the Charter Trustees have any internet presence. Maybe it's as a subsection under the BCP website. It could even reflect some of the up-to-date activities that the current mayor is doing, because I think people are quite interested in that.
I'm really surprised that you don't look at Facebook more often and go to the Charter Trustees of Bournemouth's Facebook page.
And Facebook is very, very important, but as I learned a few years ago, Facebook is not life. And I just think in the future, that's a place where we could put all of the current mayor's portraits, maybe even get some of the past mayor's portraits that we might have digital versions of in the future, and then it might enable the kind of the historical posterity of that position to be there somewhere forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Any further questions? If not, I'll move to a vote on this. All those in favour of item A in the recommendations, please show your hands. Okay. And those against? That is carried, thank you.
And if I may, Mr Deputy
You
Mayor,
can have yours recorded,
Certainly,
George. It goes as a matter of say now.
We have an automatic printer that does it now.
Okay,
we never know when my name will appear again, Mr Mayor, in 200 years' time.
moving on, guys, on to item B, which is the former Bournemouth Borough Council yellow and blue flag, as to whether or not we, as Bournemouth Charter Trustees, should adopt that flag as the Charter Trustees flag. Obviously, as Charter Trustees, we still have the right to use the emblem, which is on there. It shouldn't be displayed anywhere else now. The Bournemouth emblem belongs to the Charter Trustees, so it would, in my opinion, it would be right, just and proper that we use that flag. It would only be used for civic services and things like that, for mayor-making days, and obviously on the days of ex-mayors' funerals and things like that. I think it's a fairly simple one, and again, if there is any debate, quite happy to listen to that. If not, go straight to the vote on that. All in agreement with that one? Yeah. Thank you very much. The next one is that the Charter Trustees, the working group, we had a long talk about the function and roles of the mayor and where they cross over with different functions of different people and what the role of the mayor actually is. And basically the Charter Trustees is here to uphold the traditions of the previous mayoralty, of previous offices, both in Poole and here in Bournemouth and Christchurch. And it was decided that it would be a really good idea that if the civic parties of both Bournemouth and Poole got together and agreed on a new engagement matrix. The one we had, the engagement matrix, was set out before we were even formed. It was done under GDP or whatever it was, I can't remember now, it's so long ago, before this council was even created. And it was a fairly rushed thing with who was going to do what jobs, where and when, with who and how. And I think it's now time, coming up to a new election next May, we need to get these things in place now to make sure they are right and proper and are functional for us as Chartered Trustees. So with the agreement of everyone, I'd like to suggest that we arrange a Chartered Trustees meeting with the people from Poole, so that we can all sit down with everybody, with the civic team, and go through a new matrix so we can decide who is going to be doing what and where and when. So do members agree to doing... Just interlude that. Just to confirm, the people from Poole, is obviously, we're talking about the mayor, the deputy mayor and the sheriff of Poole, certainly. So it's not a political make-up. It's a pure... be myself, along with Dave and a few others of us here. It'll be a non-political part, and just to try and ensure that the legality and the historic performance of the mayor is not diluted. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you. Could you just clarify the position with Christchurch as well in this? Because they've got their Christchurch, and you didn't mention Christchurch in relationship to the...
Yeah.
Thank you, Charter Trustees. The Christchurch is a separate legal entity, separate body, so they cover their own areas, so they have their own mayor and we don't get involved in that particular issue, so it's not part of this exercise. So we're clearly the issue for us is around the management of engagements that affect our Charter Trustees and the chairman of BCP Council.
So I understood there was a discussion to see the relationship also with the chairman of the council as well, and that's why I was asking the question, because obviously we've all got to fit in with the role of the chair of the council.
Yep.
Yeah, Yeah, it's a fair point. We'll take that into consideration. Thanks for raising that, Stephen. Yeah, we haven't approached for the reasons that Richard has just mentioned, but we can certainly talk with the Mayor of Christchurch and see if they would be willing or interested in. Graham's going to...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just thought I'd make the point that the difference in Christchurch, of course, is there are 5 parish councils, of which one is the town council, which has a mayor, the others have a chairman, and we, of course, also have the Herne, I've forgotten what it's called now, Holdenhurst Parish Council. So those are 6 separate bodies. I mean, my sense is I'd have a discussion between Paul and Bournemouth Charter Trustees. I would suggest potentially inviting the chairman of the council as well to that discussion. I think that'd be helpful. Mm-hmm. But then we do need to think about how we engage more effectively with the parish and town councils, because there are 6 separate entities and they all cover their own patches. So there's no... The Mayor of Christchurch is only responsible to and for the Town Council of Christchurch, not for the former borough of Christchurch.
Yeah. Phil?
Yes, thanks. I think Councillor Bartlett raises a very good point. There are 2 issues here that we're talking about here. There's the kind of internal issue in terms of how the BCP chairman position, coupled with the Charter Trustees of Poole and Bournemouth, operationally work when we're invited to engagements direct. And I think it's really important that we nail that. I remember being part of the discussions in the shadow stage, and we were just trying to work things out then. It was a relatively new entity, and I thought we were pretty clear at that point that if it was a very specific council function, something that the council was doing, then it was very much to be fronted by the chairman. But if it was anything else that was that we were invited to, essentially, that wasn't particularly driven by the council, then clearly that should be driven by, attended by and fronted by the respective town mayors. And so I think it's important that we get that into some definition. But I think Councillor Bartlett's point is while separate, important as well, in that we've got to make sure we're not treading on each other's toes. You know, we've got the mayoralty in Christchurch. I know from previous interactions that there are things that they've been invited to and we haven't been invited to. So at the very least, it would be good to establish an even better working relationship. So that probably comes after working out what we do in terms of our own engagement matrix. But I think it's critical that we have some ongoing dialogue with however many mayors we're having to deal with to make sure that protocol's in place.
Yep. Okay, so everyone happy that... Sorry, Anne.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question and then maybe follow on. Do invitations to the Mayor of Christchurch come via the Mayor's team, which is based here?
No, they're totally separate from us.
So, is it again a question? So, I think that's probably the nub of what we're trying to do with Paul. But then, when it was the Queen's funeral and there were various services around the place, if the invitations it was sudden and we didn't have a chance, but things of that sort, coronations coming up, there were various things. How will we sort out then whether something's going to be in the Mother Church of Bournemouth, of Poole, or in Christchurch Priory? Who decides that? And I think it is important, maybe not with the different parish chairmen, but certainly the Mayor of Christchurch should be involved in this discussion, because the chairman is the chairman of Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. So if that mayor is excluded, or the Bournemouth and Poole mayors are excluded from what's going on in Christchurch, I think there can be some difficulty. I really think they should be part of the discussion. I take the point, you know, parish council, technically we might be a parish council, but we do have a mayor, and the only one in Christchurch that I know about is the Mayor of Christchurch. They don't have more than one. So could you answer those, someone answer the questions, Richard?
Thank you. Yeah, obviously, town councils have a mayor, so that's by definition. So their equivalent at parish level is a chairman, so that they are the same level in that respect. So I think if we're going to liaise, I think we should liaise with all of the respective parish and town councils. They're of equal standing, but I appreciate the figurehead of a mayor can be seen with obviously robes and chains as a slightly different body. I think we clearly do liaise with Christchurch Town Council. When we have major events, the team will contact the Town Council. We do have quarterly meetings on cross-boundary issues as well. So we are in dialogue with the Town Council, and certainly over the recent events we were in dialogue with the Town Council. I think my preference here would be that we sort out our own internal arrangements first, and I think after that, I think we could then perhaps have some dialogue about our working relationships with the other town and parish councils.
I may follow on, Deputy Mayor. So I must say I hadn't thought of bringing it up, but it did sort of rankle that the big knobs from Bournemouth all went to Christchurch Priory for the Queen's funeral service, and that Bournemouth and Poole, well, we weren't also Rands because we were lucky enough to have the Mayor looking after us in Bournemouth, and I'm sure the Mayor of Poole. And there's another point that those chairmen and members of the Christchurch parishes are not necessarily elected members of BCP. They might come from elsewhere. So does that figure, would that make a difference if they're not elected members, or should it not make any difference? And how was the decision reached that Christchurch Priory was the place that was the senior place at that funeral, and not that the chief executive and the chairman and the leader of the council all seemed to go to Christchurch, and we didn't have them here, and I don't really know what happened in Poole, but I guess if they were all in Christchurch, they weren't in Poole.
Yeah, you can have that one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's 2 points in there I think that are worth picking up as examples, if I may. The proclamation of the new king is one which caused some ripples of consternation around the conurbation, and the instruction on that, just to be really clear, was that that proclamation would be read in London first of all, and then on the following day in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and again in London, would then be read by the High Sheriff in each of the County Shrevell areas, and would then be read by the principal local authorities. So BCP Council takes that function. So the chairman of BCP Council read the proclamation on the steps of the BCP Civic Centre. Now, I know that was interpreted by some as being a Bournemouth event, but actually it wasn't. It was a BCP event on the steps of the BCP Civic Centre by the chairman of BCP Council. Other organisations had a choice of reading the proclamation if they wished, but it wasn't part of the formal hierarchy and the formal dissemination of the proclamation. I believe Christchurch Town Council decided not to do it. Most of the parish councils decided not to do it. Poole Charter Trustees decided to do it a week later. So that was down to local choice. But in terms of the formality of that, and this is where we need to be really careful when we get to the coronation, we will be doing that almost certainly as principal local authority, and then there may be other functions for the Charter Trustees or for the parish or town councils. With regard to the service, that was much more a matter of local choice. There is no church hierarchy that I can detect that would say one church is above the other in terms of the main churches in Bournemouth or in Poole or in Christchurch. However, Christchurch Priory indicated that they were going to hold a service and invited the chairman and myself and others to that. We were also invited to the Bournemouth one and the Poole one. My sense was that was probably the right decision for the Priory and also to ensure continuity in relationships with Christchurch, but equally I think we could have made a different decision. I certainly think that was a reasonable decision to go to the Priory to do that on behalf of BCP Council, but there were also events at which the Charter Trustees for Bournemouth and Poole were invited to. My sense is it would be helpful if BCP Council were to decide to use one of the churches as its principal church. That would be helpful, but also slightly divisive. So I just put that out there, but I do think as a council it's helpful, and I personally think the Priory is a very, very impressive building and a very, very impressive place in which to hold a civic service. But that's a personal preference, and I'm sure that members would have a view were we to bring that to BCP Council for a formal decision, which I would hesitate to do at this stage.
Coward. Okay, George, I think you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. It was the anecdotal side of things, because I think it's the difference between the historical civic mayoral duties and that of the unitary of the chairman as the first citizen, as laid out in the report there. In fact, it doesn't beat around the bush. It says second only to the monarch. Anecdotally, I stood in for the chairman as vice chair in my first term in an event in the Priory, and there was some consternation as regards what the pecking order was between the mayors, but they gave way to the chairman. So I don't think it necessarily has to be a confrontational discussion with Christchurch, because obviously there is a established sort of shall we say, tribalism, whereas the BCP overall, and I very much appreciated that they gave way to the office of the chairman, which I was representing, on that particular occasion. But you do have occasions, as in that particular case, where it's the Lord High Sheriff and, you know, a variety of people in tights with swords, etc., kicking about. And it is incredibly important that the pecking order of the protocol and the hierarchy of these different offices, whether they be elected or appointed, is actually observed. So I do welcome Councillor Bartlett's comment that we do need to include Christchurch, but perhaps in a less confrontational way, and identify that the mayors are sovereign within their own particular geographical area, but the chairman overall, as per the report, is second only to the monarch or the monarch's representative in most events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. And I think what you said there at the end is the critical point. We need to redo the matrix. We had the matrix, which was set out previously. A lot of things have come up since that hadn't been thought about at the time of that matrix being done. And it's just a chance now to review it, to rubber stamp who does what, who has precedent over what, when, where and how and why. And that's why we just want to do that now, so we can get it in place. There'll be a new council next year. We've had 3 years of BCP now. It's time that we had all of these things in place, ready to go. We've had 3 years of practicing at it. Next year, new council, it's time when it always should be right and set in stone. So I think this is the right time now to have these updates, if you like, to such things as the matrix. And I think that's why I'd like to see us agree to us having this meeting with the pool people, so that we can get it all set in stone for future times. So
I think you've raised some good points, George, and I welcome them. And Councillor Bartlett has raised a good point about Christchurch, which we will bear in mind. I think Richard or Graham made the initial point. Let's do what we need to do with Poole and Bournemouth first to get that ball rolling, because we need to get it sorted. The matrix was set up 3-4 years ago. We've now got actual practice of it, and we want to try and reduce any conflicts, and also, in fairness, make it easier for the officers when invitations come in. They're not being, oh, should I give it to them or should I give it to them? It should be fairly straightforward in who they hand them out. So I believe this is a good compromise. It's a good review. It's time for review. We've done and operated now for nearly just over 3 years, in fact. And it's a review is nothing wrong with having a review. If the system's working, but it just needs some fine tuning. We're not going to smash it and rebuild it. We just need some tinkering, if that's the best word. And it will involve the Mayor of Poole, the Deputy Mayor of Poole, and the Sheriff of Poole, along with myself and David, and maybe a couple of our own councillors as well, or trustees, I should say. I would like for us to have that agreement, so then we can ask Richard to set up the meeting once Remembrance Sunday is out of the way, for our initial first meeting to try and set up the order. And I'm quite happy for the chairman to be part of that process as well, because it involves that role as well. Can I therefore, without taking over from Dave, can I have everybody, by a show of hands, agreement that we can move that way? Is that okay? I think that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have to leave because I have to go to another function, but can I just mention about remembrance? Yeah. I need to leave, and apologies for needing to leave early, members. Just one quick one, certainly for Bournemouth people, they'll know my thoughts on upcoming Remembrance Sunday. It's the one event of the year that we should all be at. I know that a lot of us have to go to different ones around the town and in our own wards and things, but it is the one day of the year where the public expect to see us out there on the cenotaph, respecting the veterans that are there. We have it coming up, Sunday the 13th. I would please ask as many Bournemouth Charter Trustees as possible to be there on that day to say thank you to the veterans and to show that we do respect the work they've done and to just respect the town as a whole. It's a very special day for me. It has lots more meanings apart from just a remembrance side. That's purely a personal thing. But it does gripe me when last year the attendance was so poor. I was really upset that so few of us had actually bothered to turn up there. So I am asking you this year, if we can, please, 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 make an effort and be there and respect the town and the tradition, which is what the Charter Trustees are here for. On that note, I beg your good night, members, and I will see you all shortly.
Yes, thank you, Dave. Dave has another function to go to, so I've given him my permission to get lost. Right, we'll move on, if everybody's okay with that. Can we now move on to item 6, and I'll now ask Matthew Filmer if he can give us an update on the finances of the trustees, please. Matthew. Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry?
Oh. Yeah, that's coming back to the working group again. Sorry. We did discuss new links, but the quotes that we had for them were old quotes, so we've asked the team to get new quotes for the links and for the updating of the mayoral change, and they'll come forward at the next working group.
If anybody's unfamiliar, the links on the chain has the names of every mayor, and it's getting to the stage now where it's getting a bit, if we start at it, so we need some new links, and some of the links taken off and put into the chamber, into the mayor's parlour, in a frame, as the old chain is, because it's becoming a bit necessary. Can I now please ask Matthew if he can fill us in on the finances, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Charter Trustees. So this is a finance update report. It starts with the budget monitoring for the end of September. And you'll see on Appendix A, it sets out the detailed forecast for the financial year, and you'll see we're currently forecasting underspend of £13,000. And at the very bottom of that Appendix A, when we add that 13,000 to the brought forward reserves of just over 58,000, it takes us up to £71,000 in forecasted reserves by the end of the year, which is roughly about 50% of the council tax preset that we set. So the report highlights the need to hold budget workshops. We've held for the last 3 years in November to support the setting of the 23-24 budget. Now, part of the agenda for that budget workshop is to discuss the budget in terms of its consistent underspend. So that 13,000 I just referred to, that will be the 4th year that we've been reporting underspends. So the plan is to have a detailed review of some of the budget lines to assess them, ensure that they're still applicable. One area that you'll see on the very first line of that Appendix A is the hospitality budget, which sits at £12,000. We've never spent anywhere near that. So the idea of the workshop is to discuss that in more detail, whether we can cut some of that budget provision and thus reduce our council tax charge next year potentially, with the reassurance that you've also got the reserves to fall back on in emergencies or deal with any one-off activities. So lastly, the report just highlights the finalisation of the external audit for 21-22. So last meeting in June, I brought to you the annual governance and accountability return, and that's now been signed off by the external auditors. So just to add, Mr. Mayor, we didn't mention this earlier at our briefing, the budget workshop last year we had the current mayor, the vice mayor, the previous mayor and the budget signatories, and we're requesting if we could have one volunteer to also attend that for the budget workshop in November. So I'll stop there for any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Two things, we need one volunteer. If not, I'll pick one. Good old army method. And secondly, any questions, please? And I think, have you got one, please? Yeah, please, stand up, jump up.
I'm responding to your request for a volunteer.
You want to vote? Okay, yeah. Fine. No other volunteers? You're selected. You'll regret it. You were in the army, George. Never volunteer. Right. Part of the reason, as you're probably all aware, I don't want to speak down to you, but obviously COVID has had a massive impact on the budgets and for the surpluses, etc., etc. Richard has forbade me. I wanted to go to the Cayman Islands, but he wouldn't allow me to spend the money going there. So that's a major disappointment, but never mind. The budgets do need to be, the precept for the mayor for Bournemouth is not particularly great, but any contribution we can make, and if we need to reduce the budgets, we should do. Otherwise, it'll become an embarrassment if it grows and grows over time. It's fairly big now. It's not out of control, but we need to take account of that because members of the public will be starting to ask questions. Therefore, before I close the meeting, has anybody got any A or B they would like to raise? Can I thank you for attending tonight? It's lovely to see you all. Some of you I've not seen for a while. I've been in sunny Norway, which is interesting. I've seen the Northern Lights. Have you ever seen the Northern Lights? Go and see them. They're fantastic. Right, thank you very much. Good night and safe journey home.